Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the third instalment of the Carl Stanfield episodes on the Jack the Lad podcast. Welcome back for a third week in a row, Carl.
Yeah, thanks. Always a pleasure, Jack.
Yeah, brilliant. So in the last episode, obviously, we were going through each trail, as it started from day one all the way through, and we got on to the... No,
you got
it
it.
Slipped. No, I haven't. The North Crest? No.
Continental Divide.
Continental Divide. Right, I will get there.
Yeah.
So do you want to just pick it from where we left off?
Sure. Yeah. So this is now leg 3 of the journey. So I've gone fully border to border once. I've hiked most of the Pacific Crest Trail at this point. And then I'm starting on the third trail of the year, the Continental Divide Trail, which follows the spine of the Rockies. So the first, I didn't break it down by state. So I hiked through 24 total states last year. So half of the lower 48. So the Appalachian Trail spans 14 states. And then I added on Florida and Alabama. So 16 states were done in the first half of the year. And then the Pacific Crest Trail is just 3, just California, Oregon, Washington. And then coming south on the Continental Divide Trail, it starts in Glacier National Park at the Canadian border in Montana, and then comes down through a little bit of Idaho, and then Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico. And so I've got 5 states left. I'm starting in Montana. And I had some friends from the first time that I hiked the Pacific Crest Trail meet me at the finish line and pick me up and drive me to the airport the next day. So I had not quite 48 hours between finishing the Pacific Crest Trail to getting on the Continental Divide Trail. And then hopped on. I had a friend that I'd worked with at the outdoor store in Alabama on the other side of the country that was working at the national park for the summer. And so I had a buddy there to pick me up and get me to trail, and then started coming south through Glacier. So I got my permits and everything, and started coming south now. And I'm now in big grizzly country. This is, other than maybe parts of Alaska, this is one of, if not the biggest grizzly areas in the United States. And so for that, I'm carrying protection for the first time in the form of bear spray. So like a giant can of mace, basically, that shoots like 15 feet and puts up this, this wall of pepper spray, basically, if you come across any grizzly bears that charge you. Throughout the course of the state, I'm pretty sure that I did see 2 grizzly bears. I definitely saw 2 bears, and I just saw the back ends of them as they were taking off away from me, fortunately. They seemed huge and just really wide, so I think they were grizzlies. I can't say for sure, but I'm pretty sure I did see grizzly bears coming through Montana. And one of the interesting things about the Continental Divide Trail that differs it from the other 2 is that it's more of a general route than the other 2, whereas there's a definitive main trail through the entirety of both of the other 2. And that's in place for a lot of the Continental Divide Trail. But just kind of part of the ethics of that trail is more sort of choose your own adventure. There's some different areas you can go through. You can kind of take the shorter route, go the longer route, just kind of whatever you want to do. And so at this point in the year, I'm a little bit behind in my schedule. And so I'm starting to take shortcuts. And so throughout this whole year, all of this hiking stuff is kind of just like a person by person basis of like what your rules are. These agencies recognize these through hikes, however you say that you've done them, basically. But my rules for myself were that I always carried all of my gear with me. It's a popular thing on these trails to do what's called slack packing, where like maybe you stay at a hostel one night and they drive you to the trail. You hike all day without your full gear and then come back to the hostel at the end of the day. So you've slack packed, you've left your gear, but I wanted to always carry all my gear with me. And then I always wanted to connect my footsteps throughout the entirety of the trails. And so as long as I started where I left off the day before and then finished somewhere else on trail, I was fine with it. And so on the Continental Divide Trail, especially, I was starting to do more road walking. So the thought there being it's faster to be and more efficient to stay on the roads. I can resupply quicker and more conveniently that way. I'm going to be able to get through the miles faster. And at this point in the year, I'm 2/3 of the way through Mentally, the exhaustion starting to get there a bit. My body's definitely worn out too, but I'm ready to start treating myself as much as I can. So at this point in the year, I'm always happy to look forward, find hotels, and I've got plenty left in my budget to be able to spoil myself a little bit. So started doing more kind of road walking to connect some of these bigger wilderness areas, starting in kind of the southern half of Montana.
So when you're obviously you change it from obviously doing a lot of sort of hilly ish walks, and then on the road, are you still climbing within that, or is it fairly flat?
It's fairly flat. There's still, kind of some rolling hills and everything. But it's a lot nicer than going up some of the steep mountains. I've got my trekking poles packed away in my backpack for these road days. Like I know I'm never even going to use them, and I can just be hands free. And a lot of the time too, the hands free helped to kind of distract myself a little bit, because on the roads there's usually pretty good cell phone service. So on road days, I could be on my phone all day and just, kind of just like scrolling through, sometimes even like watching stuff on my phone while I'm walking, picking my head up to look around when cars are coming by. But a lot of these roads are not super well traveled. And so when I'm on one of those, I don't mind kind of distracting myself and checking out a little bit. And something that's also nice there is I put my headphones in and could make phone calls. And so I could talk to friends and family through the day a lot during this. So still putting in the miles, but kind of mentally checking out a little bit, which I've talked about this before. It was nice to be able to do that, but also kind of detracted from being present, and could make the experience harder in the long run versus trading off the comfort in the short run of being able to talk to family and kind of, check out a little bit.
When you were talking about obviously the grizzly and being in grizzly country, was there never a thought to have a firearm?
No, I didn't think about that so much there. I mean, for one, they're really heavy, and then also it's better protection to have bear spray than to have a firearm. Where putting bullets in this massive heavy creature might not stop it at all, but if you can interfere with its eyes and its sense of smell, that's going to totally stop it. So even having a firearm, if I was able to aim properly, fast enough while it's charging me, it might do nothing. Whereas with the spray, it's a large bottle. It's 8 ounces, half a pound of spray, and you unload the entire thing at once when you use it. And so it sprays like 15 feet out in front of you, and you're basically making a force field of this spray. And so as long as you're not on the wrong side of the wind that's coming through, you're basically creating a force field that is just about guaranteed to stop this bear. Whereas a firearm, it's heavier. It's really unlikely you'd have to use anything anyway. And so having it somewhere quickly accessible is, it's not a great look for all the the folks that are coming through, and the national parks. Like the safer thing to do that they educate you on is to have this spray, and so yeah, that's definitely a common question with that protection. But as far as the most efficient way to protect yourself from that specific wildlife, the spray is the way to go.
All right. And when you were talking about obviously the mental side of it, when did that really start sort of ramping up, and you were like, when it was you hiked day, you slept, hiked that. So when did that start to sort of settle in? It was like me, I've still got so far to go, or did that realization, was that only when you started obviously pampering yourself a little bit?
Yeah, kind of both, I think. So finishing the Pacific Crest Trail, starting again, even though I didn't have as much time off, it's just like mentally draining. At that point, I've hiked about 6,000 miles at that point, and I'm starting over from square one at a new trail. So mentally, that's just really taxing. Of like, I've hiked 0 miles of this trail, and I need to hike the entirety of it, and I still haven't finished the trail that I just got off of. And so I've only hiked fully one trail. And then at that time, I was still planning to do a 4th trail after that. I was going to finish the year by hiking across the state of North Carolina, back in the Southeast, which is A lot of it's a little bit flatter, so it was going to be easier to go through. It's further south, so getting into winter wouldn't have been as bad. And it was near friends and family. As you know, I'm coming into holiday season, I can start visiting with people again. So that was the initial goal. So at this point, I've only checked off one of 4 boxes, and it's late August. It's starting to get cold, and I've got a lot of work to do. So all of those factors are just starting to take their toll on me. And the quick transition as well, going from finishing and not even fully finishing one trail to starting the next one without much of a break was tough. So I got through Glacier. I hiked like not even 24 hours and checked into a resort hotel for 2 days. Burned through a good little chunk of the budget just to like treat myself. They had this great hotel buffet breakfast spread that's just open to the public to come in and, you know, pay for, but you don't have to be a guest. And I had breakfast there one morning, and then I checked out basically 3 days later after that, and just hung out and was just kind of a fly on the wall in this resort place in this really popular national park. So kind of forced myself into this break, and yeah, let myself have that, and then started getting into it a bit again after that. So shortly after that was that huge wilderness area where I got hurt at the start of. So I got set behind even further when I started out. I treated myself to a few days off, and then 3 or 4 days later, I had that little injury that I talked about earlier on, I think in a former podcast, about bruising my hip and having to sit out for a few days. So pretty early on, I set myself back a good bit on that trail. It was needing to make up time, so I ended up doing more road walking than I was hoping to do, which was nice to get through quicker. It was nice to stay in hotels more. I missed out on a lot of the great mountains. I went through Montana and got to go through Yellowstone. That was really cool with all the big geysers and everything that are up there. And then the Wind River Range, which is really beautiful. That was one of my favorite parts of the year in Wyoming. But then just about as soon as I got into Colorado, it was first week of October at that point. And so snow starting to come down in the mountains. You can see the peaks are totally frost covered, or they're white. And so, and I also got sick about halfway through Colorado, and I ended up staying with a friend for another couple days. And so I ended up road walking basically the entire state of Colorado to be able to get through. So missed out on a lot of the cool mountains that I hadn't seen yet, just looking at them from the road. Started to really take its toll on my feet of just pounding the pavement so much that I can definitely tell a difference there. So while it's kind of easier on the muscles, it still is a pretty big strain on the feet. But it was worth it to be able to go just a little bit quicker. And then getting into New Mexico, a lot of the trail at that point is kind of back roads and such anyways. And so took an abbreviated version of the Continental Divide Trail, and that one ended up being just under 2,000 miles for me. But I connected all my footsteps. I stayed within my goal and got down to the Mexican border the very end of October.
So, as you mentioned there, obviously you ticked off the box of your first the Appalachian Trail, and then you'd missed out of, was it 600 miles, 700 miles?
Yeah, of the Pacific Crest Trail. Yep, 700 miles.
From there, so obviously you've got to the Mexican border. Did you then loop back to do them miles?
Yeah, yep. So that was the next leg. And so sticking with my goal, there was a fire closure on the Pacific Crest Trail that I had missed in Oregon. And so there was a 100-mile stretch that I'd had to skip because it was closed in the summer. It had since reopened, and I wanted to stick to my rules that I had for myself of connecting my footsteps. So when I finished the Continental Divide Trail, I actually flew back up to Oregon and got on trail there to try to close that up. But I had 3 days to finish that. And then I had a friend that was taking off some vacation from work to drive me back down to California to finish up. And so I got to Oregon, and after all the road walking that I'd had to do to finish up, and as much as I was pushing my body, I realized the second day that I was back on the trail in Oregon that my body wasn't going to hold up to be able to do the final push I needed. So I needed to start averaging more miles to make up for time for the rest of the year, which mentally I could have done, but I realized even getting back on the easy terrain, I was moving really slow, and it just wasn't physically possible anymore. So after I accepted that realization, the day I was supposed to meet my friend, I started hiking out and was going up a mountain and just ran into a wall of snow. I got into snow that was 2 or 3 feet deep. I had 30 something miles to go that day, and I just wasn't going to be able to make it to be able to get to the road. Even starting at 5 a.m., I wasn't going to make it by 10 p.m. that night. So I had to turn around. And so mentally I'd already accepted that it wasn't going to go the way that I wanted it to. So I left just that little gap of miles that were up there and turned around, went back to a road, met my friend. And then we drove back down to California. And then on November 1st, I got started back on that trail. And I hiked the first little 50-mile stretch of it and then went into town. And then after I had accepted that I was going to need to take some time off, or that I wasn't going to be able to finish the whole thing, I took 10 days off to kind of reassess what I wanted to do and decided not to do any of the trail I was going to do last, but to just take my time and finish out this stretch of the desert, and not be in any rush, but just enjoy the last couple of months that I was out there and just take it at whatever pace that I needed to. So I reassessed, decided to continue on so that I'd at least have fully finished these 3 trails, even if I wasn't going to start the 4th, and get that done. So around the 1st of November, I did that, and then slowed down, started taking days off the rest of the time. And that was how I finished up in the mindset that I finished up the trail in.
Good. So how many days off do you think you had during this time?
Yeah, so I have it all recorded. I need to go back and actually count it all up and tally it and everything. But I think somewhere in the range of like 40 to 45 days over the course of the year, from January 1st to December 18th. About a month and a half of that was time off.
All right. And if you were to do it again, is there any plans for you to do it again to try and obviously get that 4th stretch in?
It's possible. I need to see how my body's going to recover from this. I'm still working on that. And I definitely want to do more hiking in some capacity. The next thing I want to do a bit slower and take my time. But I don't know. I had such a positive experience from last year. I might do something like this again. So it is possible. So I am thinking about things that I might do differently for sure.
Right, brilliant. And you mentioned there about obviously your recovery and stuff. What have you been doing post trail?
Yeah, so a lot of time, the majority of January, very little to nothing. I've just kind of posted up at my sister's house. She has an extra bedroom I was able to stay in. I'm at my parents' place right now, just taking time. So just visiting with family, just relaxing, just kind of mentally checking out from everything. And only just recently starting to actually process, go through my journal entries and everything. I'm spending some time on the stationary bike, just kind of some more low impact stuff on my knees and joints. Starting to get into doing some more yoga and stretching out. Everything's definitely really tight. I tried to go on a run as soon as I came back. I'd been a runner before and kind of training for this year, and ran the slowest 5K of my life. Coming back into it with just all the tightness and then the soreness in my knees and everything. So I haven't tried running again that was the first of the year I tried going on a run and haven't gone back to that since. I could just tell it was taking a toll on me. Because one of the interesting things about finishing up is how my body has adapted to it as far as weight gain. So, of course, while I'm hiking, my body became super efficient with processing calories and everything. But from the time that I started slowing down on trail, so I took 10 days off and then slowed down. By the time that I finished, while I was still hiking, I noticed that my clothes were starting to fit a little bit tighter. And checked, I was staying at a friend's house and checked the scale there, and it had said that I'd gained a lot of weight. So I asked, there was another hiker that was staying there, and I asked them to check it and just make sure it was right. And they checked it, and it came out and said, well, according to that scale, I've lost a few pounds. So I knew the scale was probably fairly accurate. But in the last 6 or 7 weeks of hiking, I actually gained 25 pounds while I was out there. So 10 to 12 kilograms while actually hiking. And so just from slowing down my pace, my body had become so efficient with calorie burning. I was probably eating 3,000 or 4,000 calories a day. I mean, nothing super crazy, but my body had gotten used to fueling 40 miles on that many calories, that when I cut it down to, 20 miles a day, it was just gaining weight like crazy. And so part of the strain of getting back and trying to run is my body's got a lot more weight on it than it had in the past. And so, so that's part of the adjustment too, is getting my body back into the the physical shape that I'm comfortable being in after a lot of weight gain at the end of the experience.
You said there obviously about the weight gain. Have you had any joint pain or any sort of pains that have prolonged past obviously the end of the trail or trails?
So a lot of the pains I had been feeling, I was mostly feeling while I was moving. The things that have lingered a bit, I definitely have hip pain that I've noticed has gone down a bit, but that was something for at least the first month. I was feeling pretty much every day, even just getting out of bed. I could tell that my hips were bothering me, and then even now I still feel it a little bit in my knees, like coming downstairs in the house. I've been fine to walk. I've gone on a few walks, and around like the 4 or 5 mile marker is when I started to feel my feet kind of bothering me again. So I'm not feeling persistent pain anymore, which is nice, but I can tell that when I start going a bit, it's still there. And so, so like I mentioned, just working on stretching out more, kind of doing some yoga, doing some more, just sitting on the bike and pedaling away a little bit, just to kind of get my body used to things at a slower pace again.
With covering the sort of distance that you did last year, do you think that will have a benefit, or do you think it will take away from not necessarily your length of life, but any sort of issues? Do you know what I mean? As if like if your body was to be worn out, you know what I mean? If you can walk it into the ground, so to speak, do you think there is sort of a point where you go past and then there's, the diminishing return?
Yeah, I'm really interested to see what that ends up being, because I'm not totally sure. I've heard, fairly strong cases for both sides of that argument of like, you use up your ligaments and wear all that stuff down, and then it becomes a pain. And then also, our bodies are made to move so much, and that if we stay doing that and stay active, that they'll recover and repair themselves. And so I know in the past, like after the first time that I hiked the Appalachian Trail in 2018, just that northeast part, New Hampshire and Maine, are just so extreme hiking that even doing 15 miles a day up there, I came back and it was a couple months before it didn't hurt going down the stairs again. But then I went out and hiked the Pacific Crest Trail. Took time off. That went away. I felt fine. Hiked the Pacific Crest Trail. The AT on its own is about 2,200 miles. The Pacific Crest Trail is almost 2,700. And so hiking a longer trail out west, I felt better at the end of that one than I did at the end of the Appalachian Trail the first time, even after having done that. So I had more miles on my body cumulatively. I had hiked more in that stretch than I had on the AT. But just from it being, a slightly easier grade, I felt less pain than I did at the end of the first one. So that made me feel at least that it wasn't compounding too much, that I hadn't done any damage that was too permanent, that I was able to get out. And, there's still mountains and everything out there, and there's still a lot of climbing and coming down. But hopefully that's a testament to how well my body is able to recover from that sort of thing. And so I've experienced in the past of being really worn out and feeling like, oh, I hope this isn't permanent, and then getting out and experiencing it not being too much. And so I'm hopeful that that's the case this time, and that just by, eating well, stretching, just doing everything I can to take care of my body, staying active, that I'll be able to continue to recover and get to keep doing things like this. And again, also that I mentioned in the last podcast, Nimba Will Nomad, the man that didn't start long distance hiking until he was 65, was able to get out there and hike tens of thousands of miles over the last couple decades. So I've heard stories and have been encouraged by other people being able to do this sort of thing for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I am firmly in the camp of if you don't use it, you lose it. And like you say, like humans were built to walk. We weren't built to drive in cars. We weren't built to go on trains, planes, all the rest of it. That's just something that's come along, in the last 100 years. So I agree. I'm in that camp 100%. I do think that up to a point. I think obviously if you kept walking after you've had injuries or certain things, and you're pushing your body past its limits and way past its limits, then I do think obviously it will then have a detriment on you long term. With your looking forward to the future, and you think, have you got any plans for anything at the minute, or are you still decompressing from obviously the massive achievement of last year?
Sure. So I've got some loose plans. I don't have anything, as hard set in stone as I was looking forward to this last trip for so long. But one of the things that's so nice about it is having something to look forward to and having a very clear goal that you're making very clear progress towards. Just like, as far as being in good mental health, I find I'm in the best place during a hike and even looking forward to a hike, of like having this thing to look forward to. And then while doing it, of having a very clear-cut goal that you're constantly moving towards and every day checking progress towards. And so I like having those plans, and I'm a planner. I'm a logistics guy. So I'd like to hike a few of the shorter trails in the country. So, a couple 100 miles, maybe 1 or 2 of those this year, just to stay out and stay active and everything. And then I'd like to hike the Continental Divide Trail again and go the long version of it. So the way I hiked it, sticking on roads, I missed Colorado, which is one of the prettiest states in the country. I stayed out of the mountains for that state. So there's still a lot of new stuff to see there. And I want to be one of, if not the ultimate expert on the Triple Crown trails in America. And so I definitely think I'll hike all of these trails again someday. The Continental Divide Trail, I'm heavily considering for going back towards next year. If you take all the alternates and go the longest way possible, it can be over 3,000 miles. And so there's still a lot there that I haven't seen in some of the prettiest parts of the country. And then I haven't really traveled internationally before. I've mostly stuck to the States and traveled them really thoroughly. But the Te Araroa that goes across New Zealand is really high up on my list as well. It's about 1,800 miles that goes fully all the way across both islands.
I've never heard of that, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I didn't either till I was on the Appalachian Trail the first time. I met someone that had done it. And you're hiking through Lord of the Rings country out there. And so that's something that I want to do really slowly and, be kind of a tourist for that, go into all the towns and take a few days to explore all of the off-trail stuff. But that's a totally different sort of adventure rather than just wanting to put in lots of miles and see friends and family, but really exploring something totally new. So that's definitely high up on my list as well.
Nice. Right. And then I've got a bit of a sort of selfish request here.
Yeah, great.
I've got you on. And like I said, obviously we're doing this walk later in the year. What are your sort of top things to watch out for, or, what sort of kit, making sure footwear, all that sort of stuff? What would you give, a novice like me? What sort of advice on that?
Yeah, I think, at least with long distance hiking, one of the things that I learned early on is that not all advice is good advice. And with doing stuff like this, people want to come and give you advice and tell you what to do and give you definites and everything. But I think so much of this is all personal experience and what works for you. People will say oh, you have to wear this type of footwear. If you don't, you're silly. But it's so person to person dependent that I think so much of it is trusting whatever amount of experience that you have and going off of that, and taking everything that you hear with a grain of salt. Having said that, I will also give personal advice, but just knowing that I believe everything I say may not even apply to everybody that I tell it to. But I think footwear is a big deal. I think it's good, whatever you go with, to try it a decent amount before you go out. And I'm a big proponent of trail runners or tennis shoes versus heavier boots for this sort of thing, especially doing bigger miles like this. The thought being that while you could have boots that might be sturdier and more durable and everything, that's more weight that you're carrying on your foot. And a pound on the foot is worth 5 on the back, or whatever they say that it is. So having light footwear, even if it can get wet, that usually means that it can also dry out a little bit better. And so going with lightweight footwear that's not as durable, I think is a good idea to go out with. But even within that, I think everybody, it's such a personal thing of what fits your foot best and what feels best on you. And then I think with eating too, it probably doesn't translate as well to a shorter hike. But just making sure you get calories, however it is, you don't need to spend a ton of money on like the super fuel gels or whatever. Like whatever you're going to enjoy eating when you're exhausted is the kind of food that you should carry. And so if that's candy or chips or whatever it is, just being able to have something that you're looking forward to getting the calories in, is what you should carry to be able to eat through the day.
Right, that might be something that I need to look into actually. Now that you've just mentioned that, because I don't really eat carbs. I live pretty much off meat, veg, and fruit. Well, anything that comes from an animal, basically eggs. I tend to steer away from dairy. But yeah, that I had overlooked that actually. If I'm honest, I hadn't even give that a thought. So that might be something. I'm just going to jot that down.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and like I said, whatever works for you, whatever you know that you're going to enjoy eating, that's easy enough to carry. And within that too, I think you can be more creative and go outside the box with the things that you do carry while you're hiking. So I met people that would eat like sardines they would carry while they were backpacking and just have the little tin and open it up out there and eat it and pack the trash out. Like stuff that doesn't seem like stuff that you'd want to take out. You can totally still take out, like all my resupplies and food I'm carrying is just stuff I bought at the grocery store. It's not specialized food in any way. So just whatever you think you might enjoy eating, carry that, pack 5 sandwiches if you want to, whatever it is.
Yeah. I hadn't even thought of that. I mean, I'm sure I'd have come up to it, or someone would have made a comment and I'd been like, oh yeah, I need to. But yeah, that's brilliant. And last thought from yourself, I ask every guest this question. What advice, whether it be hiking, life advice, what is the professor's advice to the listeners?
I think what sort of inspired me, a big part of what inspired me to do this was just wanting to chase my dreams before, kind of time and life passed me by. Like COVID, that whole experience was a good wake up call to like things can change very drastically in ways that you can't expect. And so, I'm at a point where I wasn't in a stable career or in a stable relationship or anything like that. And so taking advantage of the freedoms that I had of not having really too much responsibility for somebody in my position to get to just throw everything into kind of chasing this dream and this huge goal. And that there really may never be a time that feels great to do that sort of thing, but life's not about work and having a career and looking forward to retirement. I think it's about finding ways to chase what entices us while we can. And so to anybody listening to whatever point we are in life, that like you're not going to feel super prepared for chasing whatever the sort of dream is that you might have, whatever that might be for you. But that's a fine place to start. That's where everybody starts from. And just putting the energy into it and getting momentum going I think it's totally worth it. I didn't end up tackling this huge mileage goal and setting this record that I wanted to. But I still had one of the highlights of my life that may stay in that way forever from this experience that I got to have. And I enjoyed it so much. And I just want people to be able to get out and have adventures and chase dreams and do whatever that is for them. That's what it's about, to go do it, find out what that is for you, and however you're able to chase it and make it happen.
Definitely. Couldn't agree more. Well, thank you very much for coming on the podcast, Carl. It's been an absolute pleasure listening to your story. And I will take a lot away from this, if I'm honest.
Awesome. I'm happy to hear it. Yeah. I love getting to do what I do. And one of the coolest parts of it is hopefully inspiring people to do whatever this version of this is for them. And so I love spreading it. I want everyone to go out and do cool stuff.
Brilliant. Right. Well, do you want to give everyone your social, your Instagram?
Yeah, definitely. Yep. So Instagram, that's really the only place that I post for now. I might add on some more social media stuff. I might get into the YouTube game later. But for now, it's just Instagram, and it's prof_Carl. So PROF_CARL.
Brilliant. Well, like I said, thank you very much for coming on the podcast, Carl. It's been an absolute pleasure and very interesting throughout.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great. I love getting to talk about it. I love that people are interested in it, and it's good to get, for me too, just to get to kind of reflect on things by telling stories about it.
Yeah.
So thanks for having me.
No, honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you everybody for listening.